Coming up on Global Business, the IMF slightly upgrades its projections for global growth compared to its April forecast, saying the rise in central bank policy rates to fight inflation continues to weigh on economic activity. China's top diplomat and Foreign Minister Wang Yi is attending a two-day meeting of the BRICS National Security Advisors in South Africa, where global cybersecurity topped the agenda on day one. And we'll take a closer look at how the rise of AI in China is creating new demand for qualified professionals. And welcome everyone to Global Business here on CGTN. I'm Michael Wong here in Beijing. Well, first up, the International Monetary Fund has slightly improved its outlook on global economic growth for this year, thanks to recent progress in mitigating risks. According to the IMF's World Economic Outlook update for July, the global economy is expected to expand by 3% in 2023 and for 2024. Compared to its April forecast, the growth projections for 2023 have been raised by 0.2%, while those for 2024 remain unchanged. The IMF has upgraded its forecasts for both advanced and emerging economies by 0.2% and 0.1% respectively for this year. The forecast for China is unchanged at 5.2% for 2023 and 4.5% for 2024. The fund has cited the resolution of U.S. debt ceiling tensions and contained banking sector turbulence in both the United States and Switzerland as contributing to the receding risks since its last forecast back in April. However, the IMF is still warning about the adverse factors in the global economic outlook, including persisting inflation, financial market repricing, heightened debt levels, and deepening geoeconomic fragmentation. All right, let's get more on the IMF's latest update to its World Economic Outlook and bring in Wang Yaojing, Assistant Professor of Economics at Peking University. Professor Wang, welcome to the program. So the IMF still projecting 5.2% growth for China this year, although it does cite some concerns to Chinese growth. Nonetheless, Professor Wang, 5.2% is still the second fastest growth rate among major economies in the world and 2.2 percentage points higher than the IMF's projection of global growth this year. So what do you make of the latest view by the IMF on the Chinese economy?
Thank you for having me again, Michael. This is very much in line with the Chinese government annual growth rate target, and China has scored 5.5% growth in the first half of 2023, and this 5.2% growth projection is a reasonable outlook given China's continued recovery. So our inflation level is reasonably low, and we are sufficiently far away from conflict areas to be directly affected by. And also, Chinese government is doing everything they can to maintain stability for economic growth, including prudent monetary policy and then positive fiscal policy, so that our financial system and households would not go through too much stress from fluctuating interest rates and asset prices. And having said that, we also should expect headwinds as world economy slows down. Demand from the international market would be weakened, and China's export would be affected. And policies aiming to stimulate domestic consumption is expected in the second half of 2023.
Yeah, a lot of uncertainties in the external environment, Professor Wang, because the IMF talking about several risks to its global economic outlook, including, like we mentioned, sticky inflation. The market's expecting less tightening than what policymakers have actually signaled, and that could mean assets repricing to the downside and negative spillovers, rising debt levels, as mentioned by the IMF, and geopolitical and geoeconomic tensions as well. So given all of these factors, what do you think right now could be the single biggest risk facing the global economy?
Well, as you mentioned, like persistent inflation, interest rate hikes, debt crisis, fluctuating asset prices, and geoeconomic fragmentation. So a lot of these are actually highly correlated. So it's like a chain reaction from a series of policies since 2020 and even earlier. And they seem to be pointing at policy made or to be made by a small group of policymakers. And we know where the roots are, and we just hope that the policymakers around the world would adopt a multilateralism principle rather than unilateralism. After all, we human beings as a whole, we face bigger challenges together, such as climate change and food crisis that could potentially cause bigger and longer damage to the human race. And one of the reasons why China's continued growth would be beneficial to the world economy is that China has adopted a responsible policymaking principle, and that enhances a win-win from both sides of the trade.
And like we were saying, Professor Wang, the IMF has upgraded its forecast for emerging economies by 0.1%, but the fund is also calling to attention the large short-term financing needs of many emerging market and low-income countries to service their debt in the current environment. How concerned should we be about these economies in these uncertain economic times, and especially if we see advanced economy interest rates continuing to rise? Because I feel a lot of the debt held by these emerging market economies is denominated, for example, in US dollars.
Yes, and if you look at the overall growth projection for emerging markets, it's actually 4%, which is higher than advanced economies projection, which is 1.5%. But within the developing countries, there are a lot of divergence, and countries that rely more on, like you said, debt in foreign currencies would be more susceptible to US monetary policy spillovers, and countries that rely more on natural resources would be vulnerable to demand and exchange rate fluctuations. So besides these financial risks, and like I said, the climate change and food crisis is an even more severe risk that could potentially hit low-income countries. And these extreme temperature and lack of food can cause more permanent and severe damage to these economies than just lack of credit.
Now, despite the slight uptick to its global growth projections, the IMF says growth remains weak by historical standards. The fund citing historical annual average growth between 2000 and 2019 was actually 3.8%. Again, they're projecting 3% growth for this year. Are we entering, you think, Professor Wang, into a new normal of slower global growth?
Well, if we expand our horizon to, say, 100 years, 200 years, or even 2,000 years, we'll see that the average growth rate before 1750 was near zero. Industrial revolution and other things that promoted innovation and fueled productivity growth got us out of the Malthusian poverty trap. It is just that we so happen to live in an age that technological advances happen a lot more frequently than before. And since the new millennium, we had China entering the WTO, we had big advance in information and technology and so on, plus no major wars affecting large areas in the world. And whether we'll stay at 3% or go back into the 3.8 or 4% area, it really depends on when the next technology breakthrough will come, or whether a more stable global political and trade environment would happen. But either way, it would be achieved a lot faster if countries would cooperate with each other.
Yeah, we certainly need that global economic stability, and seeing if those technology gains can really translate, I think, into productivity gains as well. We're going to leave it there. Many thanks for your thoughts, as always, Professor Wang Yongjing from Peking University. Thank you. Well, this week, important interest rate decisions are expected to be announced by the U.S. Federal Reserve, the European Central Bank, and the Bank of Japan. The Federal Reserve's July Federal Open Market Committee meeting is anticipated to result in a 25 basis points increase in interest rates. Market observers are eagerly awaiting Chairman Powell's announcement on July 26th for more specific guidance. Though inflation in the Eurozone has dropped significantly from a peak of 10.6% last October to 5.5% in June, the markets are predicting that the ECB will continue to raise rates by 25 basis points. Meanwhile, the market in Japan is forecasting no changes to the Bank of Japan's yield curve control policy at its upcoming Friday announcement. Meanwhile, the South African Reserve Bank has warned that its rate hiking cycle is not over. After 10 interest rate hikes, the bank's Monetary Policy Committee agreed to keep rates on hold in its latest meeting. Our Sumitra Naidu has more.
Good day.
It was a sigh of relief when the Reserve Bank governor announced that the repo rate will stay unchanged at 8.25%. South Africans have had to digest 10 rate hikes since November 2021, which pushed the prime lending rate to 11.75%.
The consumer is under a lot of pressure. I mean, all the banks have reported that impairments, which are basically defaults on loans, are increasing at a very fast pace, and even spending by consumers is under a lot of pressure. The retail sales numbers were out, and they showed that there was a big contraction.
It's estimated that household debt was sitting close to $160 billion at the beginning of 2023. A recent report revealed that consumers are spending over 60% of their take-home pay to service their debt.
Many of those consumers would have taken out their first bond or vehicle in the period 2020-2021 when interest rates were lower. And at that time, we said consumers must be careful that they leave a buffer. But that buffer is come and gone. So I don't think we have a case of consumers overextending themselves deliberately and spending on luxuries.
However, the central bank noted improvements in the economy. Consumer inflation also eased to 5.4% in June, a level last seen in October 2021. But the governor warned that there were still upside risks to inflation and that there could be more rate hikes later this year.
At the current repurchase rate level, policy is restrictive, consistent with still high inflation expectations. Serious upside risks to the inflation outlook remain. In light of these risks, the committee remains vigilant, and decisions will continue to be data-dependent and sensitive to the balance of risks to the outlook.
They're not calling the peak yet because there is so much uncertainty around inflation going forward, particularly around food price inflation, fuel price inflation. These, are affected by a number of global factors and can change. And as a result, they're not going to commit to a peak until, they basically start cutting. So yes, is there a possibility of more hikes? Absolutely. Is there a chance that this is a peak? Absolutely.
The Reserve Bank's decision to keep rates on hold is certainly a relief, but it may be short-lived. With so much uncertainty here and abroad, the outlook remains murky. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
And a look now at some of the other headlines we're tracking at this hour. The Turkish central bank has announced measures aimed at supporting monetary tightening, including an increase in the monthly maximum interest rate on credit card cash usage in overdraft accounts from 1.91% to 2.89%. The move is intended to balance domestic demand and control inflation. The South Korean economy exceeded expectations in the second quarter, with improvements in trade offsetting weaker consumer and business spending, leading to calls for the central bank to ease its monetary policy. And German business sentiment declined for the third consecutive month in July, highlighting concerns over the country's economic outlook, which has been in recession since the beginning of the year. And up next here on Global Business. China's top diplomat and Foreign Minister Wang Yi is attending a two-day meeting of the BRICS National Security Advisors in South Africa, where global cybersecurity topped the agenda on day one.
We are all connected. Across borders, across continents, connected by ideas, a shared humanity. Stay connected.
Well, global cybersecurity topped the agenda on the first day of the BRICS National Security Advisors meeting in Johannesburg, South Africa. China's top diplomat and Foreign Minister Wang Yi was among the Chinese delegation, alongside representatives from Brazil, Russia, India, and South Africa. The gathering is seen as a precursor to the BRICS Leaders Summit slated for this August in South Africa. Sumitra Naidu has more from Johannesburg.
Well, diplomats are expected to continue their deliberations on how BRICS member countries can effectively address traditional and non-traditional security threats. They're talking about terrorism and also to look at ways of how they can actually coordinate their responses as member countries. Now, the National Security Advisors meeting is quite important in the preparation for the BRICS Heads of State Summit that's going to take place next month. This is going to be one of the largest BRICS summits to be held, and I think expansion and looking at the interest coming through to become part of this BRICS grouping is really going to be top of discussion here. South Africa has invited over 60 heads of state from the Global South to attend this year's summit. All 54 heads of state from Africa have been invited. There's also growing interest in the BRICS grouping, with over 20 countries from South America to the Middle East officially applying to become members of the grouping. So what we saw over the last day was meetings with the Friends of BRICS. We've had people from Saudi Arabia, representatives of Iran coming through, really to have these discussions, and much of this, participation, they really want to formalize something. There's also growing interest in a possible BRICS currency. We do know that a discussion of an alternative to the dollar will be discussed, the de-dollarization and the use of local currencies.
Meanwhile, Foreign Minister Wang Yi will be visiting Turkey tomorrow, where he'll be welcomed by Turkish officials, including President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. They are expected to discuss regional issues as well as bilateral ties. CGTN's Michal Bardavid has more from Antalya.
In a similar visit, China's senior diplomat Wang Yi last visited Turkey in March of 2021. At the time, Turkey and China were intensely cooperating in the fight against COVID-19. The two countries have since continued their cooperation and are hoping to elevate relations to a higher level. Turkey joined China's Belt and Road Initiative in 2015, and since then, China has invested in various Turkish industries, including infrastructure, energy, port facilities, and technology. In 2015, China's Industrial and Commercial Bank of China, ICBC, also entered the Turkish market. During the visit, Turkish and Chinese officials may also focus on the ongoing conflict in Ukraine and the grain deal that has recently collapsed. Turkey has put itself in a unique political position by maintaining positive ties with both Kiev and Moscow. Last year, Ankara, together with the UN, played a crucial role in brokering a grain deal with Ukraine and Russia, which was recently suspended by Moscow. Ankara hopes to restore the deal through negotiations. Some international relations experts, such as Professor Kutay Karaca at the Istanbul Aydın University, stress that the timing of the visit is critical.
China's influence over Russia makes Turkey a crucial intermediary country between Russia and Europe. This meeting holds significant importance, and its outcomes may even create differences in the global political arena.
Professor Karaca adds that global power dynamics are shifting and that China's role is on the rise.
Now, if a power were to oppose the West's influence, Russia would not be the leader, it would be China. That's why, even though Turkey is part of the West and a member of NATO, its relations with China and Russia are of great importance.
Turkey has also expressed interest in joining BRICS, a grouping that includes China and Russia, which would also further enhance cooperation between the two countries. Michal Bardavid, CGTN, Antalya.
And to the Belt and Road Initiative, where the China proposed infrastructure project launched in 2013 taps into the vast growth potential of the countries along the new Silk Road. The original Silk Road, with a starting point in today's city of Xi'an, had a long history of forging trade networks throughout Central Asia, India, and all the way to Europe. Now, in the decades since its launch, the Belt and Road Initiative has expanded to Africa, to Oceania, and Latin America. The most recent data show that trade with BRI countries has grown to account now for over 34% of China's total imports and exports in the first half of the year. Xi'an, the capital of northwest China's Shanxi province, has set an ambitious goal of BRI trade reaching 30 billion yuan this year, or around $4.2 billion, with 80 million yuan being settled in the Chinese currency. And still to come here on Global Business. We'll take a closer look at how the rise of artificial intelligence here in China is creating new demand for qualified professionals.
From the 1,035-kilometer railway linking China to Laos, facilitating connectivity and boosting economic growth in the landlocked Southeast Asian country, to the joint China-Saudi Arabia photovoltaic project to harness renewable energy in the oil-dependent kingdom. The Belt and Road Initiative has come a long way since it was first proposed in 2013, complementing the development strategies of partner countries and building on their existing strength.
开创合作共赢的新模式。
The Belt and Road Initiative, linking the world in the pursuit of common prosperity for humanity.
Well, China has expressed its strong commitment to supporting employment by encouraging the growth of both emerging and mainstay industries. And during a meeting on Monday by the Political Bureau of the Communist Party of China Central Committee, policymakers emphasized the need to take swift action in order to achieve this goal. The integration of the digital economy with advanced manufacturing will be promoted as a means of gathering and generating new job opportunities for the significant number of graduates that are anticipated to enter China's labor market this year. And here at CGTN, we're launching a series of reports that will take a closer look at the new job opportunities that are emerging and the efforts being made at the grassroots level in order to sustain employment. Now, one of those opportunities is, of course, in AI, where several Chinese tech giants launched their very own AI models at the beginning of the year. And now, fresh applications are being developed, creating new demand for qualified professionals. Our Zhang Shixuan visited one tech firm and a university over in Shanghai to find out more.
With just a few voice instructions, the car can quickly respond to a driver's request or question. More appropriately speaking, it's the new cabin system that is handling the responses. The idea of smart cabin systems has been around for a while, but with support from SenseTime's new AI model sets, new applications are now possible. It's all keeping engineers and product directors busy. Liu Hao is one of them.
I had been mainly working on products related to deep learning and image recognition. But now, with the development of big AI models, I joined the innovation department. I now work on new applications of the big model technologies in vehicle cabins.
The product innovation department Liu now works in is a brand new segment of the company, established just at the beginning of the year, as the company was finishing off its planning for its big AI models.
We
have to learn more about the advanced big model development and also analyze users' demands so as to connect technology with the actual demands. The Product Innovation Department is now responsible for demand analysis, tech introduction, product and solution design, as well as early-stage project implementation.
Shao says that while the first members of the department's team were selected from within the company, he's now looking for more staff from outside.
With the emergence of the large AI model, we have received a huge number of demands from car makers. Functions such as travel route planning and children's services weren't possible without the big models. But now the structure has been upgraded from just the user end to a combination of that with the cloud. We now have higher requirements for product design, R&D, and quality control. We need people from different industries.
While the concept of big AI models has been under the public spotlight only just recently, the academic world has been preparing for it for quite a while now. The beyond expectation job offers for graduates are proof of the hot demand for professionals in the field.
One of my doctoral graduates once got an offer with an annual salary of 2 million yuan. Master's graduates usually go to large IT companies, which are very active in enrolling new people in departments related to natural language processing. There's not enough talent to fill the demand. Some of my top master's graduates are getting jobs with an annual income of more than 800,000 yuan.
Zhao has been teaching students at Shanghai Jiaotong University specifically in the natural language processing field, the key knowledge required for big AI models, for more than a decade now. And he says the big job offers have been coming in for at least the last 7 years.
From March to July, on average I've been getting one email application to study for a PhD every day. After the launch of ChatGPT, I added another chapter into my lessons on the big language model.
Zhao has just written a textbook specifically on natural language processing, which has included the most recent trendy concept, large language models involving ChatGPT. A college graduate employment data report released by Lie Ping says that the demand for doctoral graduates in the field has more than quadrupled from a year ago. Zhang Shixuan, ICS for CGTN, Shanghai.
And of course, the global generative AI market is witnessing unprecedented growth, having surpassed $10 billion in value last year. Projections indicate a compound annual growth rate of nearly 36% from this year all the way to 2030. Investors are showing a keen interest in generative AI, with a substantial $4.5 billion investment in startups in 2022, as reported by PitchBook. Big tech players are wholeheartedly investing in select companies, while venture capitalists actively seek out startups operating at the convergence of AI and various industries. Now, in light of technology's rapid advancement, Chinese authorities have taken measures to regulate generative AI platforms. Recently, the country released its first set of rules concerning services provided by such platforms. These regulations require platforms to utilize legal data sources and seek consent when dealing with personal information. Additionally, the guidelines include recommendations to specify age groups for each service, with a particular focus on protecting underage users. And with that, we're going to wrap up this edition of Global Business here on CGTN. I'm Michael Wong here in Beijing. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you again next time.
This is CGTN.